is Heike. I work at the Colegio Postgraduados in Texcoco in Mexico. And I'm going to talk to you about ruderal vegetation as a source of medicinal plants in Mexico. I'm going to get to definitions in a minute. I just wanted to remind you that the idea that weeds are an important source for medicinal plants have been around for a couple of years now, particularly thanks to a couple of papers of Rick. There's also a biological explanation for that. There are some empirical data that perennial plants tend to defend themselves more by producing thorns, lignins, stuff that's more expensive in energetic terms. Whereas fast-growing plants often turn to producing cheap stuff, which would be biologically active small molecules. However, I can tell you that a lot of people don't like that, and reviewers too. But well, how do I go on? Here. First, weeds. There are a number of definitions. You can talk all day, just like you can talk all day about what ethnobotany is. You can talk all day about what weeds are. The most common definitions are unwanted plant or plant out of place, mostly by agronomists, pioneer plant by a lot of ecologists. The definition that I usually use is plant or species that forms populations in environments strongly modified by humans without their direct help. However, within weeds there are differences. Now, the definition of ruderal is also quite unequal in the literature. I'm using definitions that are widely used in Europe, mainly. We should distinguish between agrestals plants and ruderal plants. Agrestals plants would be those that grow in cultivated fields, annuals particularly. Ruderal plants would be those that grow in irregularly disturbed sites, such as roadsides, field borders, surroundings of human habitations, sport fields, abandoned lots, walls, stuff like that. The main disturbance type with agrestals plants would be plowing and weeding. Whereas in ruderal plants, there may be sometimes turnover with the soil, but generally it's more like mowing, trampling, pulling out. The disturbance temporality is important. In agrestals plants, it's usually quite regular, so the same time of the year, which makes it easier for plants to adapt to it. Whereas in ruderal plants, it's more irregular. Also, in agrestals plants, you usually have good soils, as good as the farmer can make them. In ruderal plants, it's very diverse. There may be some very good nitrogen-rich soils, but there are also maybe some that are very bad for plants. Competition is also more variable in ruderal plants. Some of them may have no competition at all, others do. And as far as the life cycle go, at least in Europe where this thing has been studied, the differences, you usually have more annuals in agrestals plants that are also, more annuals, or perennials with underground structures that serve as diaspores. Whereas in ruderal plants are annuals, particularly like on trashy flora and stuff like that. But there are more perennial plants and also more wind-dispersed plants. Now, if we look at this landscape that formed the background of the first picture, of the first slide, we can see this is natural vegetation back there. There are, of course, the fields, but there are very substantial surfaces that are covered basically by ruderal vegetation. These are just some pictures so you get an idea of the Mexican context. This is a village road that was recently paved. So you have a lot of stuff around here in the home gardens. There are the cultivated plants, but also a lot of growing plants. This is the kind of street floor. There we have a datura, or roundhouses, roadsides. Okay, so this is a thing that just occurred to me. Well, I've been thinking about it for a while, and I wanted to know if there was a difference in the contribution of these different types of weeds to the medicinal flora in the Mexican context. What I did was basically reanalyze 3 other studies in different climatic and cultural regions of Mexico. These had very different aims originally and different data sources, different types of people they interviewed. But they had studied medicinal species and their source habitat and differentiated between agrestal and ruderal weeds. And we did some simple statistics. The first place was, or the first study was my undergraduate thesis a long time ago. In the highland temperate tropics, dry season and frosts, people were mestizos of Nahua origin, and the natural vegetation would be a pine oak forest. And this Google Street View more or less shows you what the area looks like. The second place, or the second study, was one of my students. She worked in a very humid area where you have precipitation between 1,500 and 4,000 millimeters per year. Mainly Zapotecs live there, and it goes from cloud forests up here to basically tropical rainforest in the lower lying areas. And another from basically tropical dry, relatively high-lying areas that naturally has xerophytic brushland and dry oak forests, also in Oaxaca. Okay, so now the statistics. The first study differentiated cultivated field margins, nitrogen-rich sites, which is around garbage heaps and so on, tepetate areas and barrancas, which are both forms of erosion, soil erosion, and then some others. These I called semi-natural vegetation. This is what I call ruderal vegetation, and these of course are the agrestals. And you can already see a very clear difference. You can also see that the cultivated fields have a level more or less similar to the semi-natural types of vegetation. These are the data for Santiago Camotlán, for the tropical humid areas. Here the differences are not statistically significant if we use the categories that my students use, which are cultivated fields, village and roads, home gardens, only the spontaneous plants. Pastures, acahuales, which are secondary, is the secondary vegetation that comes, old field vegetation. Okay? And all the other ones. However, if you take these two together or even put the old fields on top, I mean, it's absolutely dominating as a medicinal plant source. And you can see that forests are not good sources. The evergreen tropical forest was a several-hour walk, so you can understand why people don't get the medicinal plants from there. But the cloud forest was rather accessible. Of course, there's still some medicinal plants that you get from forests. This is just looking at the numbers. And finally, in the tropical dry area, we had cultivated fields, ruderal vegetation, home gardens, spontaneous ones, and some semi-natural vegetation types and forest types. And we see the same thing with the ruderal vegetation dominating very strongly. I should mention that these do not include cultivated plants. The cultivated ones in home gardens are dominant anywhere you go. but these are the wild-growing ones. Okay, so here's some pictures of these types of habitats. These little shrubs and this one are both medicinal. This is a senecio. Oh, that changed name, but anyway. This is a composite that's medicinal. These are some wall-growing peperomes, which are medicinal. And this is an interesting case. This is Heterotheca nuloides, the Mexican arnica, which some of you may know. This used to grow in the field margins, but they've transplanted it now because the field margins are started to be taken over by an invasive grass, the kikuyu, and so people started transplanting it to their gardens. So in conclusion, rural vegetation should be taken seriously, and we should differentiate between secondary vegetation types when we look into this kind of thing. And all of this is, of course, relevant for conservation also. No? Rural vegetation can be the most important source of medicinal plants. Agrestals communities have proportions of medicinal plants similar to those of vegetation, and forest country, but relatively few. This may be different in other cultural contexts. In Africa, for example, they use more barks and roots and stuff like that. So maybe forests are more important there. I don't know. So we should start looking at this type of habitat. I think they contribute significantly, and yeah. And finally, some of you may remember my talk last year where I also emphasized the role of field margins for useful plants in general. Okay? Particularly those that have, oh yeah, I forgot something. I'm speculating here on the reasons. I don't know the reasons really, but I think they're human mediated in one way or the other. That in agrestals communities, medicinal plants that tend to be a little bit toxic or have strong tastes or something like that are selectively weeded. Why? Because people use a lot of these plants for fodder and for vegetable. So they don't want that other stuff in there. Whereas in rural vegetation, particularly field margins, people take plants from somewhere else and plant them in. After a while, you don't know that they were planted anymore. You know, you have this patch there of Artemisia or something like that. Oh, and there it is, growing for decades. Well, well, that's the plug. A month and a half ago, this book came out, Ethnobotany of Mexico, of Lira Casas and Blancas. And a lot of the stuff that I was talking about is in the chapter on the ethnobotany of weeds. Okay, so there's one thing.
Thanks for your talk. On a personal note, I've wanted to harvest rural vegetation for medicinal purposes often, but I'm really afraid of the pollution that may or may not be an issue, depending on the area. In your research, has this been raised as a concern?
Yes, people actually have concerns about that, and they've stopped using both wild edible plants and medicinal plants from areas where herbicides or other pesticides have been used, which is another of the collateral damages basically that the system does. Also, of course, there's other types of pollution. I mean, you don't really want to eat or drink tea if something that's along a very heavily traveled road and so on. But, well, you don't know where it comes from often if you buy it. I mean, if you collect it, a lot of people do think about that when they go collect medicinal plants. Mm-hmm. Does that answer your question?
Sure.
Yeah.
So species are proportional to area. In particular, the number of species are proportional to area.
to an extent.
Well, you can
Yeah.
model that. These are essentially islands, each of your types. So we can say species equals A to C times A raised to the Z. Now, would that mean, do you think there's an effect on perhaps more species because these areas are better represented? So, for example, are ruderal habitat more common than some of the other habitats?
Well, that goes to two factors. One is the relationship between number of species, number of medicinal species, and surface area that it covers. But also, one comment is frequently that people want stuff that is nearby. Yeah? However, there is probably an effect like that. But if you look at the data, people go a lot to the fields. So they could bring medicinal plants home easily. Also, the cloud forest that I was talking about grows along a road that people travel several times a week. So it's not inaccessible. However, the diversity per square, I don't know what, 100 meters is higher in these forests than it is on a cultivated field. They're quite diverse in Mexico, but, and the ruderal vegetation, while it does cover considerable surfaces, it's not as large as the cultivated fields and natural vegetation. Does that